as Matthew had pointed out, about the sort of political context in Ottawa, the health policy context in particular in the national capital and in the provinces. And then I'm going to go through some examples of some of the tactics and strategies for engaging your political representatives that have worked for some of the groups that we work with. So Impact Public Affairs is a public relations, a government relations, and advocacy firm that was founded in Ottawa almost 20 years ago. We've been in operation for almost 2 decades, and really our bread and butter, the vast majority of our business, is helping national associations, trade associations, and nonprofit organizations get their word out, get organized, get their message out in front of political decision makers and the media, and we've been in that niche again for almost 2 decades. And as the first slide shows you, our president, Hugh Williams, who himself is a cancer survivor, so this organization in particular is one that's close to our heart. Mr. Williams had a bone marrow transplant about 4 years ago, from which he continues to thrive. Hugh Williams wrote the book on association advocacy and nonprofit advocacy under the auspices of the Canadian Society of Association Executives, which essentially, for lack of a better term, is an association of associations. So we're recognized as the industry experts in terms of helping national associations and nonprofits, again, get their word out, cut through the clutter in terms of all of the different groups that are appearing before decision makers these days, and we've had a great deal of success over the years. So the current political context, I won't spend too much time on this. I mean, you all read the newspapers. It really is, though, shaping up in Ottawa, at least at the national level, to be the most competitive campaign season, perhaps in a generation, coming up most likely on the 19th of October for a vote date. There's 3 parties that are really competitive, that are all within a couple of points of one another in the polls at the national level. Of course, the governing Conservatives, the Liberal Party, and the NDP are all within 2 or 3 points of each other, which is, making for a very interesting pre-election period. It's making for, a great deal of policy conversation, because we have a situation right now where we know that the election is going to take place with near certainty on October the 19th. We're in the midst right now of really what appears to be an extended pre-election campaign or extended election campaign, which some people complain about. Some people bemoan that fact that we have a 6 or 8 month long election campaign effectively, because we know the election date. But at the same time, the flip side of that is that we really are getting into very detailed discussions of policies. The parties are in very detailed ways outlining what their policy platforms are going to be for the upcoming election in terms of their economic policies, their foreign policies, and their health policies, all of these policy areas that are important. And we're having a very extended conversation about all of those issues, which I would argue is a good thing. Healthcare obviously is very high on the agenda for all of the parties. It always ranks at or near the top of voter concerns. Everybody is concerned with healthcare writ large, but what does that mean specifically? And that's sort of an open question. Most of the parties haven't really put out any specific policies on what they're going to do if they do anything differently in terms of federal healthcare policy. But in this pre-election period, and what we're going to talk about over the next hour or so, is how to engage your political representative. I'm going to be talking from the federal context, from the federal perspective, but all of these principles are applicable as well to the provincial level, municipal, whatever level of government it is that you're going to be speaking to. But at the federal level, in any event, between now and the 4.5 months or so between now and the election day, MPs and candidates are going to be very receptive to any message that groups have to deliver at home, in the ridings, and that's what we're really talking about, grassroots advocacy. We're based in Ottawa. We do what we do in the national capital, but a meeting in Ottawa with a member of parliament is worth a fraction of what a meeting with a stakeholder or an organization back home in their riding is worth. And the groups that we work with that have the most success are the ones that have combined strong work in the capital, the national capital, and the provincial capitals with engaged members. Again, we represent largely national associations that by definition have members across the country, no matter what industry that they work in, and that allows them to harness those members to go out and meet with their MPs or their MPPs or whatever the case may be in the riding to reinforce the message that is being delivered centrally. But for the current political context, again, it really is almost an unprecedented level of competition and an unprecedented situation at the federal level, where we really have a large number of potential scenarios that could play out on the morning of October the 20th. So the current health policy context, more specifically, the current federal government, led by Prime Minister Harper, a couple of years ago, announced that they were going to be scaling back the amount by which federal health transfers to the provinces are going to grow. Basically, for the past 12 or so years, federal transfers for health to the provinces have been growing at 6% or more per year, which is very high given today's level of economic growth and population growth. It's a level of transfer growth that outstripped all of those indicators, and really, if it continued at that level, eventually, at some point in the distant future, healthcare transfers would have occupied basically 100% of all federal spending. So obviously, that's not an option. The federal government had to do something, and they had to sort of curb that cost growth. So that they announced a few years ago that starting in 2017, those transfers to the provinces were going to start growing at around about 3% a year, which is much closer to sort of economic growth plus population growth. So the current federal government is said by many to be, disengaged from healthcare, and that is true to a certain extent. They kind of announced that they were going to be cutting the rate at which health transfers were going to be growing to the provinces. And sort of distance themselves from any sort of active policymaking writ large. However, there are many so-called niche issues, I guess, for lack of a better term, that have really gotten a lot of attention at the federal level. Mental health. There was a very large mental health announcement in the recent federal budget last month with the renewal of the mandate of the Mental Health Commission of Canada for a further 10 years, from 2018 to 2028. Issues like dementia and autism, compassionate care, even food safety, which is the responsibility of Health Canada. These are all issues that, again, the term niche issue is not a perfect term, but these are not sort of all-encompassing Canada Health Act, healthcare writ large policy discussions, but they are sort of areas that the current government, at least, has pursued in the area of health policy. So in a general sense, there's been criticism that they've disengaged from healthcare, which is true on one level, but it's also true that they've pursued these issues that I've mentioned, with some attention. So of course, as you know, the provinces are responsible for the direct control of healthcare in Canada. Ottawa plays a very important role, and as I mentioned earlier, all the parties are quote unquote committed to healthcare. Everybody is in favor of our universal healthcare system, but what does it mean in specifics? And again, we're still waiting, at least at the federal level, to hear from the parties between now and the October 19th voting day what their actual concrete plans are going to be for healthcare moving forward. So lobbying, it's a term that, of course, does not have a very positive connotation. There's perception of backroom deals, of shady sort of goings-on. But really what lobbying is it's advocacy. Advocacy is just another word for lobbying. And there are more groups active than ever before. It's really exploded in the past couple of decades. And the perception of lobbying and advocacy is negative, as with all sort of stereotypes. It does contain a grain of truth. And the reason I say that is because many groups advocate not in the public interest, but for their own narrow private interest. So that's where the negative perception comes from. The lobbyists are only in it for themselves, that they're only in it to pursue their own very narrow interest, which at times might be counter to the public interest. So the groups and the associations and the interest groups that have the most success are those that can frame their issues in the public interest. And that really is the key. Obviously, some issues are easier than others to frame in the public interest, but I say on the bottom there, the consumer and the voter are king. Anything that you can frame in the public interest as being good for the public writ large, as opposed to just your own very narrow private interest, is going to be a lot more successful when you're talking to your local representatives. So a very competitive political landscape, very competitive advocacy landscape. You realize when you work in this world just how many associations that exist. There's hundreds of them. And at any given time, on any given day or week or month, a member of parliament in Ottawa or a member of your provincial legislature in whatever province you might reside in is confronted literally with dozens of issues, and they can't possibly be experts on all of them. At the federal level, there's 308 members of parliament, 100 and something senators, and when you're pursuing an issue, you can't possibly hope to make all 308 of those MPs working actively for you. So part of the challenge is to identify those members that are going to be champions for your cause. And it might be people that are working, for example, on the health committee. It might be the official opposition health policy critic. It might be somebody who's a cancer survivor, excuse me, themselves, of which there are, of course, no shortage in Parliament. It might be somebody who, has some connection to the work that you're doing for whatever reason. Or it could be somebody who has no connection and just is interested in the issue and wants to pursue it and wants to help you out. So half the battle is really identifying those champions and working with them over the long term, because they have so many more issues to address in a given week or month than just your own. Again, it's impossible for all 300 plus parliamentarians to be actively working for you, and you don't need that. It's a waste of resources to try to pursue that. If you can secure a handful of solid champions working on your behalf, doing work on your issues in Parliament, then you're going to be ahead of the game. And when I say doing work on your issues in Parliament, you might wonder to yourself, what does that mean? It really depends on what your issue is. You might be seeking funding for a certain project. You might be seeking a change to a certain law. You might be seeking, the continuation of some program that might be ending. Whatever the case may be, these are the issues that parliamentarians can help you with. They can help put your issue on the agenda. They can ask questions in Parliament. They can table motions at committees. They can introduce legislation themselves. It's all about just identifying the people that are going to be most able to help you and working with them over the long term. So what works? Real people delivering real local stories. So federal MPs or provincial MPPs or MLAs or whatever the case may be, they work on national issues, but really they are interested in what's going on in their local constituency. So again, that's why the groups that have the most success are those that combine the sort of central work in Ottawa with sort of the buttressing or the support of that work in the various regions. We have a lot of polling data, for example, that sort of indicates and ranks the degree to which various forms of communication resonate with parliamentarians. Somewhere in the middle of that list is a meeting from an advocacy group in Ottawa. At the very top of that list is a meeting in the riding with a constituent. At the very bottom of that list would be something like a form letter or receipt from some other part of the country. So there's all of these dozens of different ways in which parliamentarians are communicated with on a weekly or monthly basis. The top one is a face-to-face, in-person meeting with somebody who is from their riding, with somebody who is doing work in their local constituency. So the groups that are able to harness their membership across the country to do that work really on a sustained and long-term and coordinated approach with a unified message are the groups that have the most success. And with a unified message is very important. When you're a part of a national association or a national organization that's doing work like this, it's very important to take the message that the association is going with. So not to necessarily focus on your local niche issue, but if it's a national parliamentarian that you're talking to really have the same message as everybody else across the country, which sometimes means, perhaps putting a little water in your wine. When you're part of a national organization delivering a national message, sometimes a little bit of compromise has to be made in the interest of everybody rowing in the same direction. But I can guarantee you the groups that speak with one voice and loudly and strongly and consistently across the country are the ones that have the greatest success. So why it works? We have a lot of research and a lot of experience that indicates that issues that are shared by the central organization, in this case CCSN, and its members are the ones that have the most success. So as an example, if there's an association based, let's say, in Ottawa, pursuing an issue that to the association staff is very important, but really it doesn't concern their members a great deal, or it doesn't motivate their members, they're going to have a lot more difficulty having success with that issue. It's those issues that unify the membership, that motivate the membership to actually pick up the phone and call their MPs back home, that have a great deal more success. And that's really our approach. Again, at the Grassroots, that's where all of the success takes place. So it's important as an association or as an organization to really have your finger on the pulse of what your membership is doing and what your membership is thinking, and to survey those members and to get feedback, and to know that what you're pushing for, what you're advocating for, is supported by your members, is important to your members, because those are the issues that are going to motivate those members to actually, again, pick up the phone and organize those meetings with their MPs in their constituency. So again, decision makers and policy makers have so many issues in front of them at a given time. It is a long-term endeavor usually. You know, groups that pick up an issue and run with it for a few months and then drop it are not usually the ones that are successful. We recently started working with a group that had been pursuing an issue for more than a decade, you know, with I guess varying degrees of success. But you know, they didn't over that period of time focus on the right avenues, and so they didn't ultimately have success. But the point being, it takes a very long time. You know, you need to, again, position your association as a resource to government. You need to be there when the government calls if they need input on a certain issue. If there's a bill before Parliament that is relevant to you or to your members, you need to be made available to have an input on that process. So again, you know, starting early, really pursuing it over the long run. You know, governments, the stereotype is that it takes governments a long time to do anything, and there is a certain amount of truth to that, but because they're confronted with so many issues at a given time. And so it's really only those issues that are pursued over the long run that are met with a great deal of success. So your objectives, of course, are to raise awareness and to champion the values of your membership. Again, as I mentioned earlier, to develop and nurture relationships with your local parliamentarians, and to get your policy issues on the national agenda. You know, that's really the crux of it. For example, the news cycle today and the you know, the attention spans of people are probably not quite what they used to be. The news cycle used to be a week or a few days. Now it's a few hours. Something that happened a few hours ago is old news. There's constantly issues bombarding parliamentarians, and again, really the ones that are focused on and pushed on for the long term, and again that resonate with those parliamentarians are the ones that have the most success. And the groups that we have worked with that have had the most success are again the groups that have spoken with one voice, that have pushed their issues over the long term, and that have educated and sensitized policymakers over time. So, you know, just picking up the phone and calling your local MP really, actually, believe it or not, puts you ahead of the game in terms of breaking through the clutter of all of the groups that exist out there. It's amazing to me, but you know, people don't even think of doing it. And there's so many ways that MPs are contacted all of the time, but really a phone call to set up a meeting is the most effective, to go into their office and to talk about the issues that are important to you, and to listen to the MP as well is a very valuable thing, and it's something that's going to put you ahead of a lot of the groups that are out there, because most people don't even think to do that. You know, for example, if you're hosting an event, if there's some sort of ribbon cutting at the organization that you work at, if you work at a hospital and there's a new wing being opened up, or there's a donation that's been made, most people wouldn't think to call up their MP and their local newspaper to come down to an event like that. But those are the types of things that give that MP attention, media attention, positive media attention, and that's like oxygen for a politician, is to get that kind of positive media exposure in their home, in their backyard. And most people don't think to do that, but it's something that is easy to do, and it creates that relationship that you can then use going forward if there's an issue that comes up that's important to you, that's relevant at the federal level or the provincial level, whatever the case may be. So I won't read the slide out to you, but I mean, it's pretty basic. Just give your MP a call. If you don't know them, introduce yourself, set up a meeting, and talk about the issues that are important to you and to CCSN, and that will help get that issue on the agenda. So it's very important, of course, to indicate that you're actually a constituent. Those are the calls that are going to get returned. MPs get bombarded. Speak from the heart. Try to keep it as concise as possible. Don't send massive packages of paper to your parliamentarian, because that's likely just to get thrown in the garbage. And copy the central organization. Copy CCSN so they know that you're doing this. And you'll have a lot more success. But again, the top point on that slide is the most important. Make sure that it's clear that you are a constituent and you're very likely to get a call back. So conversations that MPs want. What are the local statistics? I mean, they're national or provincial representatives, but they want to know what's going on locally. They want real-life stories. They want to know what's going on. And people are often intimidated at the prospect of calling up a parliamentarian for a face-to-face meeting. They think that they have to be a debate team captain. They think that they have to be a lawyer to go in and speak to a political representative or to get their issue on the agenda. But really, nothing could be further from the truth. You just have to be a human being, go in there and talk to them face-to-face, and establish that relationship. And again, there's nothing more valuable than going in and having a face-to-face conversation, a face-to-face meeting to talk about the issues that are important to your organization. So unsuccessful tactics, confrontational style, obviously, be prepared. Don't be a robot, and listen. Listen to the advice that they have to give you. MPs hear from dozens or hundreds of different organizations of varying levels of resources and professionalism. They know what works, but they also know what doesn't work. So listen to their advice. Have a message going in there. Don't just go in saying, my name is such and such, and isn't this issue a wonderful thing? You need to have a concrete policy recommendation early, because they'll end the meeting quickly and they'll thank you for your time, but they're going to ask you at the end of the meeting, what is it you want? What is it that I can do for you? So you always have to be ready with an answer for that question. What can I do for you? And what can they do for you? Again, as I mentioned earlier, they can raise your issue in Parliament. They can talk to the media about the issue or the policy recommendation that you or your organization had. They can ask questions in question period in the House of Commons. They can introduce legislation. They have all sorts of levers at their disposal to get these issues on the national agenda, and that's ultimately what you're talking to them for. So always have an answer to the question, what can I do for you? So tell a personal story, again, have a specific request, and keep your communications to a sort of concise level. Again, don't bombard them with information. If they want more information, they can always request it. They can always go back to you as a resource if they need to get more info. But don't go in there carrying a binder of statistics. Again, that's likely to get thrown in the bin. Go in there with a concise document that outlines your issues, that outlines the issues that you want to talk to them about in a maximum 1 or 2 pages. And again, if they want to get more background information, offer to follow up or have them follow up if they're seeking more information. But don't lead with a phone book full of info, because they're, again, just bombarded with so much stuff that they're not likely to go through that. So you need to get the elevator pitch down. You might often have a 30-minute meeting scheduled with an MP, and this probably happens in Ottawa more than it would in the riding, but their schedules are very busy. And in my experience, more than in any other sort of facet of life, whether it's business or any other area that you work in, parliamentarians sort of get away with not being very punctual and not being very late, just because they're pulled in so many different directions, more than any other group of people I've ever worked with. So you might have a meeting scheduled from 2:30 to 3, you show up at 2:20, and they don't they don't show up until 2:45 or 2:50. You end up with 10 minutes instead of 30. You really have to be aware of that. So you need to be familiar enough with your messaging to be prepared to pitch it in just a few minutes, and then to follow up with a concrete request. You probably will have more time than that, but you need to be prepared for the worst. So you really need to practice that elevator pitching. It takes more practice than you think. You might be very familiar with the issue that you're talking about, but it really takes more practice than you think to be able to boil it down to a 2 or 3 or 4 minute conversation and to be effective. So it does take a bit of practice, but really it's very important. So again, most will only give you 15 to 30 minutes. Be prepared to wait. And that third bullet, you may need to change your comments depending on the level of knowledge of the MP. And it's very important before you meet with them. They all have biographies that are publicly available, just to get a sense of their background. I mean, a member of Parliament may have been a nurse for 30 years before becoming a parliamentarian, and if that's the case, then they have an intimate knowledge of the healthcare system. They may have been a car dealer or a lawyer, in which case they would have, obviously less knowledge of how the healthcare system works, just as an example. But having that background knowledge is very important. You don't want to go into somebody's office who has spent a better part of their career working in healthcare and then, start pitching them the basics. They're going to be very aware of that. So it's very valuable to have at least an idea of their background, and also an idea of the work that they do in Ottawa. If they're a member of the health committee, for example, then they're going to be very familiar with health policy issues. If they're a member of the finance committee, similarly, they'll be more familiar with sort of the budget process and how that works. But just to have that background is very important, because you don't want to be condescending. Obviously, you don't want to go in there and talk at a sort of a very high level when they're all already aware of what it is you're talking about. But at the same time, it's possible that they have absolutely no background knowledge on what it is you're talking about. So just reading those bios that are publicly available will help you get a bit of an understanding for what their base of knowledge is. Often there's an assistant attending with the MP, and these people are often very young, especially in Ottawa. Young 20-something staffers. Don't dismiss them, and you might chuckle at that notion, but it's true. They do hold a great deal of influence in Ottawa and in the provincial capitals. They often decide who gets to see the MP, what issues that they address. So just be cognizant of that. They're often very young, but don't let that fool you. So typical questions that are going to be asked by your MP or by your MPP, what is it you're asking for? What can I do for you? Do you have any statistics in my writing? Do you have any local knowledge? Do you have any local data that you can share with me? Who else have you spoken about? It's very possible that you won't have the answers to all of these questions, and that's okay. You never have to be afraid of saying, you know what, I don't know. That's a very good question, but I'd be very happy to look into that and to follow up on that for you. And also, that gives you a great opportunity for follow-up and to carry on that conversation. So, introduce yourself, let them know who you are, and get as quickly as possible to your key messaging and policy recommendations. And as I said before, always have an answer to the question, what can I do for you? So ask them if they require any further information, if they want to be put in touch with the central office in Ottawa, and also let CCSN know that first of all that the meeting has taken place and if any follow-up is required, because these meetings take place all the time, and really the ones that the groups that have the most success are the groups that follow up. So as soon as possible after the meeting, sort of write down whatever notes that you may have, any follow-up that may be required, and actually follow up on it. Because if not, then it's almost as if the meeting should never have happened, because they move from one meeting to the next and one issue to the next so rapidly that it's really the groups that follow up and that continue that conversation that are the most successful. So know your issues, localize your issues. We're talking to national parliamentarians, but you need to be able to localize your issues, prioritize them, and don't rush and don't force anything. Again, as I said before, if you don't know the answer to a question, that creates an excellent opportunity for follow-up. So that's all of the presentation. Again, I'm happy to take questions, and I guess Matthew will be handling the sort of logistics of that. But thanks for your attention, and we'll now open it up for questions.
All right, thanks a lot, Michael. I think hopefully everybody on the line learned something today. I know I probably did. So for anybody who's wondering, this webinar is being recorded and will be available on YouTube, hopefully later today, depending on YouTube's upload, how that goes. And the slides will also be available on our SlideShare accounts afterwards as well. So you'll be able to find links for both of those on our website, and we'll also send out a follow-up email tomorrow to everyone who registered or everyone who attended today. And you'll get all that information there as well. So if anybody does have any questions for Michael today, there's a little check questions box on the right-hand side of your screen in the little toolbar there, and feel free to ask any questions that you might have regarding the webinar today, or anything else that you're interested in knowing more about. I'm sure Mike will be happy to answer any questions that are there. So while we wait for those, for people to ask questions, we just want to let everyone know that we're going to be hosting another webinar here at CCSN in a couple of weeks, which will be the topic's going to be on medical marijuana. And I know earlier in the year we had quite a successful one on that. We had, I think, almost 80 people show up to that one, so it was very popular. So be sure to look out for information coming out on that hopefully next week. So we're just waiting for, if anybody has any questions, don't be shy. You can also, if you think about a question that you have later that you forgot to ask right now, you're more than welcome to email us here at CCSN, or email Michael. You can see his email on the screen right there, and we can do some follow-up with that. But I guess we'll give it a couple more minutes here. Michael, is there anything else you want to say when we're wrapping up here?
No, but I think we've got a question that's popped up here. Just one second. Let me read it. Okay, what's the best approach to deal with, quote, difficult staffers? Do you move on if you can't get anywhere with them? Staffers are sort of the gatekeepers of their MP's offices. It's very rare that you're going to encounter, in my experience, a difficult staffer. More often, you'll encounter a staffer who, obviously takes their role very seriously and may be reluctant to organize a meeting because they don't see that you or your group is relevant to the work that they do. But particularly with this group, obviously it's an issue that touches pretty much everybody. So it's easy enough to go back and to make that pitch again if you're having difficulty with the staff or organizing a meeting, particularly in the riding. I mean, if you're calling your local MP, there's no reason that they should be difficult in terms of organizing that meeting. That you could encounter more issues in the capital, in Ottawa, where the staffer claims that they're too busy or this is not relevant to the work that they do. But just try to convince them, and more often than not, especially with this group, I would argue, because it is such an important issue and an issue that touches every Canadian. Persistence is key, and often they'll be difficult right off the bat just to sort of filter people out, and then just by following up, you'll cut through the clutter that way. So just know your issue, know your pitch, and more often than not, you'll be successful.
Okay, Janie is asking.
Is it possible that?
Yeah, it's definitely is possible to have the PowerPoint. We're gonna, like I said earlier, we're gonna have that uploaded to our SlideShare account, and that'll be available on the front page of our website, survivornet.ca, and we'll also send out a follow-up email tomorrow that will have the link to it in there, so you won't miss it. But it looks like we'll just wait another minute or so, see if anybody else has any other questions. If you missed it before, it's just down in the bottom right-hand side of the chat there, or of the screen there. There's a little questions bar that you can type your questions in. But it looks like we're just about out of questions. So if anybody does have any more questions, feel free to send an email to Michael or us at CCSN, and we'll be happy to get an answer for you. So Michael, I'll let you just say your goodbyes to everyone, and then I'll finish up.
Yeah, thanks, Matthew. Thanks, everybody, for your attention and for your time this afternoon / this morning. Really appreciate it. And again, feel free to get in touch with me at that contact information on the last slide if there's any more questions regarding any of this. And again, thank you very much for your time, and thanks, Matthew, for organizing it.
Yeah, you're very welcome, Michael. And thanks. Just to reiterate, we really appreciate everybody who came out today. And we hope you'll join us in a couple of weeks for our next webinar. But other than that, I just want to thank everybody for coming out, and we will talk to you all again next time.